Many people have heard of a plant called Eurasian watermilfoil. It's relatively common in the state now, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, nobody knew what it was. And it got started somehow down in Lake Minnetonka and a few of the metro lakes. And people were not happy because it grew quite quickly. And this is a plant that in the right kind of conditions can grow an inch or two a day. And it grows in relatively shallow, but can be kind of deep watered, and it'll grow up to the surface. And when it gets to the surface, it starts to grow horizontally, and it forms these mats, heavy mats that prevent people from running boats or fishing or recreational opportunity, that kind of thing. Well, anyway, it was such a problem in those two lakes that elected officials got involved with it, and legislation was passed, and a little part of the DNR was created, the Invasive Species Program. And in those days, the program was tasked with controlling this new plant, this Eurasian watermilfoil, and another plant called purple loosestrife. And you fast forward into the early 1990s, and a lake in Grand Rapids called McKinney was confirmed to have Eurasian watermilfoil in it. How it got there, there's a whole bunch of different, a lot of speculation about how that was, but it doesn't matter how it got there. The fact is that it was there. And unfortunately, McKinney sits right there on 38. And so everybody was very concerned that because this plant is very easy to move from lake to lake, and it'll reestablish when it gets in these new systems, that all of the beautiful water up 38 might become infested with it. So DNR was kind of new to the game with this plant at that time. And what they decided to do was to apply a herbicide called fluorescent, and that is a chemical that has to be put into the whole lake. And the idea was that you'd kill all the plants in the lake, including the native plants, with the hopes that the seed bank and root systems and what have you of the native plants would reestablish and everything would be good. And that actually worked. So early 1990s, McKinney was treated, and ice and hail were also noted to have had a small populations of milfoil, and ice was treated. Well, it worked really well, but about 10 years later, the milfoil would come back. It's in early 2000s, I think it was, 2008, 2009, another treatment was done with that same herbicide in McKinney, and it was effective, but it only lasted for a certain number of years. 10 years later, right, we're back at it again. People who live on the lake are complaining about the milfoil. There's a concern among fisheries and other professionals that this plant is, causing trouble with habitat, with native plants and animals, and something we thought had to be done again. So we surveyed McKinney, we surveyed hail, and surveyed ice, and decided that instead of using this fluorescent, we'd go about it with a little bit different approach, and that was to use a different, more common herbicide, and then every year or two initially really kill the plant back, and then get to a point where we didn't have to do this larger scale herbicide application anymore. And that's kind of where we've gotten. So what you saw today was the 2021 version of that project. A contractor was hired to put a herbicide in the water to kill Eurasian watermilfoil. Normally we do this kind of work in June, or typically before the 4th of July. But every once in a while, we'll do a fall treatment. The beauty of fall treatments is that a lot of the native plants have already grown and done their thing, and they're sort of on the way out. They're senescing. The Eurasian watermilfoil was still very strong in the lakes this fall. So we minimize the amount of damage that we do to native plants when we do these fall treatments. Ice treatment had about 2 acres of plants that was treated, and we didn't do McKinney this year, but we did do hail, and we did about a 1 or 2 acre total treatment on hail today too. The product that we use is a 2,4-D product. It's in a class of herbicides that are known as auxin mimics, which basically affect the way plants grow. It's effective. It's approved by the EPA at the federal level and by the Minnesota Department of Ag at the state level. And it's relatively specific. It will kill the Eurasian water milfoil and some native milfoils, but it won't cause damage to the pond weeds and other plants that are growing in the lake. So that's nice. A minimal effect on fish and invertebrates and insects and amphibians and all those kinds of things. We would never use a product that would cause harm there. And I guess the idea behind it, well, the idea behind all this is that, as I talked to a little bit earlier, we get to the point where we're basically doing a few maintenance applications every few years, every 3 to 5 years, to sort of check the plant back if it gets out of hand again. And we've gotten to that point. When we first started on McKinney, the first treatment we did, the modern treatment, was in 2018, and we had 14 acres of treatment. And then we got that down. We treated again at 9 acres, and this year when I surveyed, I could only find an acre and a half. We didn't even treat in McKinney this year. And you know, ultimately that's kind of where we hope to be. It's less expensive. We're putting less herbicide in the water, yet we're maintaining you know, control of this invasive plant. So it doesn't get moved to other lakes, and it doesn't, you know, impede recreational opportunity and all that kind of stuff. We don't have money to pay for these kinds of things anymore. We used to, but it's become such an issue, I guess, or I don't want to say it's common. A lot of herbicide applications are being done statewide, and DNR just doesn't have the funding for it. So that's typically funded by either lakeshore owners, or in this case by the AIS money from the county. And it depends upon, we're using a relatively inexpensive herbicide here, and as I recall, it was around a $7,000 operation for both lakes. Now you could go way more than that. There's products out there that we kind of toyed with using, but no, the applicator couldn't get them this year. That's like a $15,000 thing. But it's a new product, and it's kind of like sliced bread. When that first came out, everybody wanted it, but it was hard to come by. So we went with the less expensive route, and I think it was right around that $7,000 mark. I hear a lot of people who just kind of throw their arms up and say, why do we keep doing this? It's just inevitable. And I'm still a positive and optimistic person along those lines. I don't think it's inevitable. The DNR and even Itasca County has an exceptional prevention program. These people that you see standing at the accesses, inspecting boats and doing washing equipment, have had positive effects. So provided we can keep that stuff up, and researchers down at the University of Minnesota are making all kinds of inroads with you know, novel and new control methods, investigating genetic controls, those kinds of things. I'm going to paint that positive picture that yes, there are some problems. We have some lakes that have some problems, and it seems like every time you turn around, you read about another one, but it's not that bad statewide. In contrast, Michigan or some of the other Great Lakes states who have had these invasive plants and animals for decades longer than Minnesota, a very different story. In you know, those states, that many more lakes have infestations and have troubles. So we're not great in terms of, you know, it would be nice to not have any invasive species, but a lot of people are doing work to prevent that these things from causing further problems and spreading further.